is titled Transcend the Transaction, the Value of Engagement and Experience in Driving Long-Term Growth. And it's brought to you today by Macchia Group. Speaking today are Tom Kennedy, who's the president of Macchia Group, and Vito Giannola from Provident Bank in New Jersey. Take it away, gentlemen.
Well, as Julie said, I'm Tom Kennedy. I'm the president of Macchia Group. Appreciate you for taking time out of your lunch today to join us. Macchia is a company dedicated to providing business analytics, GIS studies, branding, environmental technology, real estate services, as well as full design and construction services for the financial industry. Basically, we're dedicated to finding ways to make financial institutions and customers more successful. That's our job. During the COVID-19 crisis, there's been so much talk about the fact that transactions no longer require branch facilities and that the branch is really becoming a thing of the past. If there's one thing that we see and is repeated successes has taught us this, including during COVID, is that the branch remains critical to the success of most financial institutions. There's really a war going on to secure financial services success on the internet. So far, the big winners seem to be mostly the large, well-heeled institutions and a number of upstart fintechs. While the internet may seem like this vast sea of opportunity, the fact of the matter and the history of it is that the internet tends by its nature to ultimately commoditize service providers of all kinds. And you may accrue new accounts for a while, you may be able to stimulate some interesting activity and service customers in a unique way, but it's extremely challenging to compete with that growing crowd of competitors and to sustain it over a long term. Now consider that, we're all competitors out there in the financial space. And one of the greatest weapons available to banks and to many financial institutions is the branch. It can be wielded to retain customers and sustain growth, even through COVID. What branches can do that the internet can't do is creates an identifiable branded outreach. It's visible and connected in many, many ways to the customer and the community. And it's that one chance too that you actually get that human interaction, which is still very important to many, many, many people. We have our last 20 years of data has proven this out just repeatedly, that it's still probably the most consistent and dependable way to retain customers and to build new customer base and increase wallet share for that matter. And that's been true even through the last 18 months of COVID, where we have a number of success stories. Now, equally critical to making sure that the branches are in your cadre of weapons in attacking the market is the fact that those branches must be very, very carefully and thoughtfully deployed. And what those branches are and what they do is absolutely critical. One of the most interesting aspects of human psychology is what is known as the peak end rule, which was a theory originally posited by a Dr. Kahneman in the 1990s. And simply put, the human mind doesn't experience and store memories in a linear manner. Just like a computer does, it compresses the information, it stores it in the most efficient possible way. And what it does is it looks for a couple of aspects of experiences. It literally looks for the peak or the valley. So in other words, those most prominent events and the last component of whatever the experience was. In other words, how that kind of experience leaves you. Those are the things that the human mind actually grasps onto. Next. So, again, a classic example of this, you go on a camping trip with your family or your girlfriend, and there really is a tendency to forget about the mosquitoes and to forget about, the water you didn't have and to forget about the mediocre food. And you remember the sunset, you remember that beautiful moment, you remember those next characteristics of that journey. Next. And I think nobody does this better than Disney, right? Disney is all about that sort of peak end experience. It really is about creating moments of memory. You tend to forget about the long lines and the expensive food and all those other aspects that Disney happens to have as part of its experience. But what they do so well is create these dramatic moments while you're there that are unforgettable. Unforgettable family moments, unforgettable rides and experiences, just all kinds of things. And there's a few components that you have to deliver when you're creating these experiences. The first one is called elevation, where you're trying to deliver something out of the ordinary. It's a sensory pleasure or surprise. Second, you want to create pride, where there are moments of achievement or courage. Maybe you've created something for yourself. You've accomplished something. The third one is insight, where you have a eureka moment, where in other words, you've learned something. You're smarter than you went into it. You've had an epiphany on an important topic. And finally, connection, social experience. Human beings really thrive on being connected socially. And as you might imagine, all four of those elements are extremely connected to what a branch experience needs to be and why it's memorable and why the people that enter branches that really embrace those concepts feel different and make that institution resonate with them over the long term. It's a really important lesson to learn. So enough of the theory. I'm now going to bring, you can actually stop the show. We'll go over and have Vito join us. I'm going to bring Vito Giannola in. And again, he is with Provident Bank. Vito's over 20 years in banking. He's got a diverse background, but he's always been focused on customer experience roles. Business banking, private, retail, commercial, always revolved around success of the customer. He's the perfect guest to share his experiences. He goes well beyond the comments and theory that I just expressed, and he spends every day driving real world success. So if I was going to listen to somebody, I'd be listening to Vito. So welcome, Vito. Can you tell us a little more about yourself? Maybe expand on what I shared?
Sure. Well, thank you for the intro. That was very kind. No pressure. But I was listening to a lot of your points and the statistics and data about customer experience. And, you made a comment just now that I look at things a little differently. I mean, it's obviously very important to have the metrics to back what we're believing in and what we're promoting in the field. But it always comes back to what you said before, that human interaction, right?
Yeah.
Our customers want everything all the time, every day. So we have to be able to accommodate them, whether it's coming into the branch, whether it's, a remote or an alternative delivery channel, on digital banking, on your mobile, online banking, whatever it may be. So I just wanted to get that out there because there's so many different aspects of customer experience, and I'm excited to be part of this panel today as well. So a couple minutes on myself. I've been in banking over 20 years. Like Tom said, really focused a lot of my positions on the customer experience, which is dealing with the field, both in private banking, government banking, small business banking, retail banking. Currently with Provident Bank as Executive Vice President and Chief Retail Banking Officer. We have about 100 branches in New Jersey, mainly, also in Pennsylvania and in New York. We've just recently worked on a really nice project with La Macchia, which we'll get into shortly. And a lot of things we've done with the partnership of La Macchia is getting creative on how can we simplify and make our customers' experience extraordinary. And that's a lot of what La Macchia brings to the table that we like to use their analytics for. So that's a little bit on me. I could go on and on and on, but I know we're limited to just an hour. So I'll hand it back to you, Tom.
Sure. Well, Vito, when we had talked about you joining us for this, the kind of the transcend the transaction concept, and we're talking about the importance of customer experience, it's kind of as you had just alluded to, there's all these things that create that experience. Can you give me a little rundown of like the most important aspects of that to you? I mean, what do you try to do? And I know we've talked before, and I heard you mention the word concierge many times. Yeah. I think you have such a different approach and view of how to treat the customer. If you could just give us some highlights.
Sure. When you look at the cycle of banking from years ago to today, we went from bulletproof glass on the teller side to I would say platform people in new account opening type positions, that everything was basically transactional. Then we kind of got into the place where, all right, now we want to be more customer friendly. Let's have greeters at the door, and let's open up the door and let's let people in and let them out. And we started to create new positions around what we thought would be a proper and appropriate customer experience. To me, although it's just appropriate to me, if you see someone coming in, you open up the door. If you see someone, you say hello, you smile. That's just natural, right? So we
Yep.
shouldn't have to coach people and train people how to do that. And I think we went through a cycle in banking, that kind of encouraged people to say, when someone comes in, lift your head, smile, and it almost became fake. And it got to the extreme of answer the phone this way, and there's a script. And I think, obviously, if any of us have called banks or other institutions, people start to stutter over their words. Wait, let me look at my script again. And what's my name again? Who do I work for? So I think a big aspect of customer experience is really creating an environment that's simple, fast, and easy for the customer, right? So you can offer an extraordinary customer experience just by a customer coming in and going to the teller section, or what we like to call this concierge area, just to transact a piece of business, whether it's a deposit or withdrawal or something simple. And sometimes we forget about that, and we just think, like, keep your head down, do the transaction, and let the customer go out. But that simple transaction for that customer could mean so much, because they may be in a hurry. They're coming in the branch for a reason, to transact something. And if they needed to sit down and have a more intense conversation, we need to make sure that the team members in the branch are able to have those conversations. And it shouldn't be, I'm going to have somebody call you later, unless it's more of a specialty type product like commercial lending or something to that aspect.
Yep.
So I think when it comes to customer experience on our end in the branch environment, we need to make sure we have the right talented people that are able to service those customers as they're making the effort to come into our locations.
How do you, we talk a lot about the different channels that financials try to communicate through and interface with. And how do you deal with the fact that you're trying to deliver that human side at the same time? You're really trying to bring a lot of technology to the customer, and you're trying to handle these digital channels. How do you manage all those aspects and make it relevant?
So I'm going to give a few examples on that, and one being the most recent, when we all had to deal with this PPP experience for our customers, which obviously was very important, not only for the banks but for our customers as well. So we've been, when I talked briefly before about the cycle of banking, there's always been lots of communication about how can the banks partner or become better at the fintech space. And although it's very, very important, I think every bank, depending on what their strategy is and the type of clientele they're going after and the markets they're in, will depend on how they invest in these types of technologies. So during the PPP process, as we went out there and we were with SB1 Bank, and we just recently merged with Provident end of last year. So we at SB1 were not an SBA preferred lender, where Provident was. So we were working off of them with a lot of our transactions and accommodating our clients. But one thing we agreed to do jointly, because the volume was coming in so high, we wanted to be able to accommodate our clients, is we partnered with the fintech and said, hey, we have this over volume coming in. We're going to, have a link on our website, please, jump on, take these loans for us, and let's keep the cycle going for our clients, so we could offer them that experience. Now, although it was a good option for us to do, it got to a point where our customers didn't care about the fintech, right? They came to us. So if there was a little bit of delay in the process, which we all experienced, it was our face, it was our brand. It was, how did you handle me to get me my PPP money? And now the government ran out, and what do I do? And it was all us, right? So I think there's always going to be that aspect of, we need to evaluate fintechs, digital banking options, what we could do to make our customers' life easy in banking, whether it's consumer, business, or commercial banking. But there's always going to be that need for, hey, I want to call up Tom at the bank and have a conversation with somebody, or come in and look at them, as compared to calling a call center. So that should be an option, not the main source of business.
It's really fascinating that you bring up that relationship with fintech. One of the things we've been studying really closely is the potential opportunities for relationships, partnerships, where, the local bank or credit union, whoever they may be, can really leverage the fact that fintechs do a few things extremely well. And perhaps they can do it in a way that, a regular financial institution might struggle with. So in many regards, the customer, as you said, ultimately doesn't care about the vehicle or the engine behind it as much as they care about how to get it done in a trusted way that they can make sure works.
Yeah, Tom, one thing we've done, and this is going into that cycle of banking, call it the old school way. We still pull customers on round tables and say, hey, we have some topics we want to talk to you about. And we make it a diverse group. and we just basically say, hey, what's important to you? And I tell
Yep.
you, at the end of the day, it's the same thing. Just give me what I want, give it to me fast, and don't make things difficult. That's all.
It's not complicated, right? It
Not
really isn't
complicated, no.
complicated.
You know,
Yeah.
in our industry, Tom, as you know, we can make things look so beautiful. The brand could be so bright. The
Yeah.
lights outside could shine more than Times Square. But when it comes to the actual experience, it's you have to deliver all the time. You know, you could be great at what you do, and it's that one or two time experience that our customer had that wasn't a positive one, and that's the one they remember, right?
Yeah, people don't like negative financial experiences.
No.
They really don't.
There's another thing that's pretty critical at Provident that we're really moving forward with and creating task force around and committees. It's, when we talk about customer experience, we really truly believe in the foundation being the employee experience. And I know a lot of people say that and say, hey, happy employee makes a happy customer. But we do take it to the next level and really say, hey, before we start to roll out a new initiative or a new task or an action item for our customers, whether it's a product or a service, how the employees feel about it. Do they believe in it? So we'll have, a committee that discusses this throughout the bank of people who would be engaged with the customers and they say, hey, what do you think about this? And do you think our customers would this be a value proposition for them? So again, that's a lot of work, right? But when you talk about customer experience, you got to have the employees engaged in what we're doing.
Yeah, no, I think that's an underpinning to success in a lot of things.
Yeah.
I'm curious, you and I haven't talked about this before, but you seem like somebody who watches the market and your competitors and everything else, I assume, very closely. When you look at a competitor's institutions, and I'm sure you walk through a lot of them, what do you see most often is missed? What do you see that jumps out at you that goes, God, these guys are pretty good, but they don't get this part?
So I'll give you a few examples, and yes, I do walk into a lot of the banks to learn, because it's always great to see what the big banks are doing, compared to the smaller regional and community banks. And I think we went through that cycle too, where all over the articles of banking we talked about universal banking, right? And I think a lot of banks missed this. I was walking into some of the bigger banks that we have in this country, and you walked on a teller line. They still had the glass up and all, and they had two tellers where they originally had five, and they had 3 or 2 teller machines that you could walk up and do your transactions automated. I've been to a few conferences over the years, and a big push when it came to technology was the self-serve machine. And I can never understand the concept of why you would have a self-serve machine in an open branch, right? Now, it serves a purpose. If you're going to rent 100 square foot in the middle of Times Square, instead of putting a branch, you could put a self-serve machine. It serves its purpose. But I think that has to be part of your strategy, right? So I think a lot of banks have tried different things. I think the big missing piece of the formula was, don't forget about the human interaction. It definitely needs to be adjusted. If we're going to invest, like some of the things we do here at Provident, if we're opening up new locations, which we've just recently done with you, in Wyckoff, New Jersey, we filled the branch with 4 talented team members. Mm-hmm. Now, you could have filled it up with 6, but we used that extra FTE and said, hey, we need to, now that we have more branches and new markets coming on board, the consolidation would just take that FTE, those team members, and put them in the back office where we need more support, whether it be in the digital channel, our customer care center. So it's really about reallocating the resources. And I think a lot of people, as they were transitioning to this universal banking model, said, hey, we need to have no more teller lines. Let's come up with teller pods, less people in the branches, but they didn't support the back office for the overflow, potentially what those clients' needs were. And I've noticed that a lot when it came to new customers that we were onboarding and just doing, roundtable conversations with our clients that potentially did some business with other banks as well.
So it's interesting because, we work with a lot of financials around the country. And I feel like one of the goals so many of them have is to actually have less interface between customers and FTEs, more of it digital, because they make a little more money if they can obviously mitigate and minimize the number of FTEs. From what I'm hearing you say, it's almost like you cherish the human interaction and try to you're glad that that's happening.
Yeah, you made a comment earlier on in the introduction about, is the branch dead or not? And I know that you and I are on the same page with this, where it's not. It just needs to change.
Yeah.
And you and I now are working on a new project that we're going to be opening up shortly, hopefully by the end of the year. A new
Yep.
banking center with a loan production office and a full retail team, and it's going to be different. Why? Not just to be different, because we think that the markets we're going into and the needs of those clients are going to be different, and we have to make sure we're accommodating them. So when you start talking about technology and all, clients, from what we've experienced and from being in the field and talking to customers and employees, it's what can you do again to make my life simple, fast, and easy. Walking into your banking center, having TV screens all over with marketing is great because it could trigger something that may excite me. So let's do that. But the facial recognition, stuff like that, you start to get into privacy where it's a 50-50, let's say, right? Not everybody loves it. It's real cool. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
And we there's a big bank, probably one of the biggest banks in the world, that has a robot that they promote in their lobby in certain locations, and that's cool. But at the end of the day, there's a normal customer walking in really want to talk to a robot to get something done, right? It's cool, it's fun. I'm all for that. We're in retail, we like fun stuff, right? But what we need to focus on at the end of the day, spend the dollars in the technology that's going to better enhance our customers' overall experience.
It sounds like a pretty good lesson. So, I'm curious, you've obviously been at a couple of different stops in your careers, and it feels like you've probably picked up an awful lot of wisdom through what you've tried and, didn't work, and tried again and it did work, et cetera. What do you think your primary aha moments have been that said, these are things that I live by when I'm looking at a new branch situation or interaction with customers?
So I would say, again, through that banking cycle, we opened up our first branch um, in this universal banking model in 2015. And that's where we started saying, okay, we're going to hire more universal style people, team members that can talk about loans, open up accounts, have more financial conversations as compared to be more transactional. But because it was the beginning days, we got rid of a teller line and we put a teller pod. I think the only biggest difference there was the shape of the teller area, and we didn't accomplish more than that. So I think as we transitioned, an aha moment was, and I've been saying this for 5 years now, I got to start to do it, that I'm saying this live to everybody. I want to go in there and rip that pod out and just get back to what we do best, which is the concierge area, right? To me, a concierge area is where you go, where you just need quick advice and you need to transact something quickly, right? It obviously was generated and initiated through the hotel space and hospitality, but it definitely fits into our universe. I mean, it's concierge. You come in, I want to do a deposit, and I'm going to walk over to someone on the platform, say hello, move on, and continue on with my day. So we did that in our Wyckoff location, and we're getting a lot of good press and recognition for that because it looks cool, it feels right. And we're going to do that in a similar fashion as we start to move forward, as you know, with the newest location that we're working on now. So I think the aha moment is, get beyond the articles that you're reading and really start to sit in the field, talk to people and say, hey, what flows right here, right? Yeah. What makes things right? And I would add to that, a typical teller line would have a cash drawer. And I know over the years, a lot of the banks have transitioned to like cash recyclers to make things simpler. For what? The employees, and to have more accurate, differences. You avoid differences, I should say, when it comes to the end of the day, which is always a headache in retail banking. So I think just making little tweaks like that keeps the flow going a lot better, both for the employees and the customers. So that to me would be probably one of the simplest and biggest aha moments on let's not overthink these things sometimes.
That's interesting. So you just mentioned in your new project that's coming up, and you said that it's new and different in a lot of ways, and you obviously have a little bit of different audience, perhaps their different customer base. How do you make those adjustments? How do you identify what that target audience or target customer base is going to resonate with? How do you get your arms around that?
So it's twofold. And, the first thing I would say is when we're going into a new market, so clearly today, the industry, as well as Provident, is looking at ways to consolidate and become leaner and meaner, right? Yep. But it's not to the extent where how do we cut FTE and team members, right? We don't need a branch where you live, where you work, and in between anymore. Smaller retails become very popular. Drive-through in certain markets are a need, right? So you need to have all this data. And I would say one thing, and really bounce it back off of you, as we're going into new locations and we identify a new location, we know that we've already been penetrating that market and it's the type of clientele we want. But it's partners like Macchia Group, and I know this sounds like a commercial, but it's the truth, where we sit and partner with you guys based on your overall experience and what you're doing in the country, because that's beyond my reach. You know, I mentioned to you before, I may walk into different branches, talk to different executives at other banks and see what they're doing, but you're actually there strategizing, doing the analytics and figuring out what works best in the demographics in those markets. So, you know, I hope that answer is sufficient, but I'd like to pass it back to you on what you do and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a little bit of, GIS, science and analytics of the demographics. They can tell you quite a bit. We use that quite a bit, at least when we try to solve for the style of the branch in particular. You can certainly tell how much human touch you have to have, how cool it should be, how technology oriented it should be. And you can figure out the channels that need to be present and very, very present in that branch. When you mentioned going, into a branch and you got a bunch of monitors going off and bells going off and it looks really cool, and maybe your kids are enjoying it. Let's face it, the guy that's over 60 or 65 is probably having a headache at that moment. And he's just looking for the guy that's going to cash his check. And I think you do have to be really thoughtful about the kind of customer you're going to have. And almost no branch obviously has a homogeneous demographic. It's always varied, but you can definitely hit the target. We see very, very different branches, urban versus suburban, highly educated versus less educated, high income versus low income. Those are big, varietal changes where you can definitely make changes. That and the type of customer you have. If you have a lot of commercial customers, it obviously feels like a very different setting than if it's all retail customers,
right?
Which is big as well.
You make a good point there, because beyond the analytics, right? So you're talking analytics and data and good talking points. When you are focusing on a banking center that's more commercial driven, you have to look at the night drop. You have to have the team members that have the experience on cash management and scanners. What is our commercial base going to need? And if we're hiring consumer-driven team members in the banking centers in a commercial market, it's a disconnect, right? So that was part of the thing I was leaning on before when I said, the foundation is the employee experience, because I'm going to put that employee in an uncomfortable position. They're never going to know the right answers. They're always going to have to make phone calls, and that's what we want to avoid. So when I say more talented, it's getting the right people at the right locations to be able to service the customer. So it keeps that flow going. It's a lot of the data that you give us, the markets we want to be in, and where we know we could grow critical mass in a fast period of time.
Yeah, one of the things that I've been so impressed by what you guys do is this real drive, it seems like, to the customer-centric view of what you're doing. And I'm just curious if there's any pointers you could give people regarding how do you create a customer-centric institution, because that doesn't come by nature necessarily.
So I wish I had the magic formula I would share with everybody, I promise. But I could tell you what we do. We a lot of things we build around when we're in strategic planning, or we're just having direct report meetings with the president and the chairman of the bank. We're talking about how we could do things better as an organization, right? We don't have unlimited dollars, unfortunately. So we have to make sure we spend our dollars the right way. And I would say this, one of the things that we feel we do very well at is we have an advisory council group. And the advisory council group are COIs, referral sources within our markets that are very influential in referring in business. We have quarterly meetings. We gather. It's an internal network with external customers. We have key people within the bank that work with these advisory council members, that engage with them, so they feel special. They are special. And we're able to just track kind of what kind of volumes coming in through that group. And I would tell you, again, through that banking cycle I keep mentioning, over the years, I think it had the right intent in the beginning in the industry. And then it turned into have the local, who are the popular people in the area, the mayors, the governors, and city council, potentially on the political side. And potentially it may be nice to have them on your council. But when it comes to business at the end of the day, for all the obvious reasons, it's hard for them to refer in clients. So it kind of got to a place of halt, right? So we've kind of really looked at that over the years, to the better of probably 5, 6, 7 years now, and said, how can we bring in people that want to advocate on behalf of the bank? And how do we make them advocate, right? That's the tough thing. And I think we figured out a formula that's working right now, where not only do we make them feel special, we're picking the right people in our markets. So you go from a lawyer to an accountant to an insurance broker to somebody who owns a pizzeria, because they're dealing with a lot of people and say, hey, you got to go to my bank. That's advocacy. And then it's our job, when I say the hard part, is to keep those advisory council members engaged, excited, feeling special. And that's something that we think is a differentiator between how we run it and potentially what a lot of our competitors do. So it drives a lot of business to the bank, but it's a lot of work. And we have a committee that just focuses on this group.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that it is heavy lifting, but it can be transformational, I think, for who you are at the end of the day. I wanted to ask you, the things you do are amazing. How do you use and leverage branding in all of this? In other words, obviously you believe in yourselves, you've created something you really believe in and connect, and you like how it goes. How are you expressing that and making sure you have a consistent brand out there?
So we're actually in the process of kind of working on that now. And our bank is over 180 years old. So we've recently just freshened up our logo, where now it's a brighter, more clean, crisp look. And now we're having conversations internally with our chief marketing officer and the team to say, how do we get this out there where it's consistent? As we're building new banking centers, as we're renovating new banking centers, how do we get that look and feel to transcend over to the customers and the employees to feel proud of what they have? And we have a lot going on now, both because of the recent merger, with our core values and our guiding principles.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things culturally, internally, that's going to link directly to what we're doing externally. So stay tuned for that. We have a lot going on that we're going to be, discussing with you and your team as well, as we start to get past some of these initial meetings we're having at the bank. But branding is absolutely critical. And, again, I throw it back to you on what you're seeing out there when it comes to branding, what you feel has worked or not worked in the industry.
Yeah, it's funny. My actual educational background is engineering. So branding doesn't come in second nature to an engineer, right? It's something you kind of learn over time. I have been more amazed by branding, perhaps more than anything else in the industry. Absolutely transformational. I can recall a financial institution down in Texas that was full of good people, with a good spirit and good thought, and they were connected in the community. And we had a great relationship with them, and we ended up dramatically changing their logo, their brand, and building a few branches for them. And more than anything else, it wasn't just the new buildings. It was this new sense of who they were. They connected with a whole new group of people, but didn't leave the others behind. It was almost like they almost gave the community like a group hug, and they've had dramatically better results. Because the kids that, would have gone down to one of the larger banks by nature, probably, out of college, because they would have had one in the college. And suddenly these kids were going to this new cool place, even though it was just a small, relatively local institution, but it completely reinvigorated who they were. And you should have seen the employees catch fire. They got so excited about having this expression of who they really wanted to be and who they were. They were like the biggest, positive energy you could have possibly created from that.
Tom, it's funny you say that, because when you try to do difficult things and transform things, it's very hard. It's a lot of work, right? Sometimes people think you just snap your fingers and it's there. But it's exactly what you're saying here. It's what can we do to make our employees and customers proud? It sounds simple. It's a lot of work, but if you get it right, you get it right. And people acknowledge that. And I agree with you. I definitely think that the branding makes a big difference of where people may come back, where people internally will be proud to say, hey, I work for the Macchia Group. I work for Provident Bank, and I'm proud to say that. So again, how do you keep that going all the time? You got to keep things fresh. You got to keep things exciting. And sometimes a little brand change or behavioral change internally on how we're looking things, how we're rewarding and recognizing people is a critical thing.
Mm-hmm.
We had recently at Provident where, we like I said, we recently shifted some of our branding around, and we changed our colors. And in the new locations, we're putting all that new colors and look and feel into it, including a lot that we're doing with renovations. But, we've in the last 12 months or so, I've also come down to a place where how do we reward and recognize our people differently. So we have a really good employee experience group. We have a very good program to recognize people that go above and beyond throughout the company, right? So as we shifted some of the incentive plans and said, hey, here are some of the things we're focusing on going forward, we had to make sure we aligned our reward and recognition to the employees on a quarterly basis. That's where the plan is now, no longer just waiting annually or sporadically throughout the year. So again, a lot of work, lots of good conversation, but if you always put that foundation first in what you're doing with the employees, it'll automatically roll over into the customers feeling proud, because now they get that certificate, they get that trophy, they put it in the branch or on their desk, somebody sees it, asks a question, congratulates them, and it's contagious, right?
Well, there's no question. Yeah, it's funny. The one thing that I definitely picked up in general too is, things like branding are important and core values are important, and how you treat your customers and how you reward them and your employees. And one of the keys I found is there's got to be a balance between all of those aspects as well. You can't just do one of these things. You can't just get in a room with your board members and do core values one day. You have to live them for one, and then you have to reward your people and treat your customers in accord with them every day. And all these things have to really happen. There has to be a sincerity behind it all.
Yeah, and I would add one more thing to that, which is the obvious. It has to be supported from the board to executive management, all the way down, or it will fade real fast. You can come up with the best idea, and I can hand you the pitch book of that idea, and you won't know how to execute it with your team if you don't truly believe in it.
Yeah, no, I think we've all seen organizations who tried to put window dressing out there, and it doesn't last very long. You get a little blast, and then it kind of fades pretty quickly. Wow.
Agreed.
Well, I wanted to hit another topic, which is a little bit of a left turn, but I am curious in your mind, because this is on a lot of people's minds that we talk to. How does technology fit into all of these for you these days? I mean, it's constantly evolving. There's something new every afternoon. How do you guys embrace that? How do you use that in your planning? What part of your life is that?
So, the conversations we're having, so technology is very important, to answer your question. Not to get specific into products and services, right. I would say, what we're challenged with today, now that with this merger recently, have become a $13+ billion bank with a close to 100 branch network. We're figuring out ways of how we can be more innovative, right? We definitely see improvement to enhance the systems we have, which we're totally focused on. We see improvement on what we really define as an organization for digital banking. And I think that's a general term out in the industry that means a lot of different things. And it's kind of amusing, because as we surveyed the employees, including the board, and said, hey, what does digital banking mean to you? We got answers from opening up accounts online, to be like an online bank with a different brand, to right. how do I service my clients more digitally as an alternative from the brick and mortar that we have in the branch network, which could be as simple as Pop Money, Zelle, things like that keeps the cash flow flying from person to person or institution to institution. How advanced are we with our mobile banking on the business side, on the consumer side? How advanced are we on the online banking when it comes to consumer and business? So the easy access to doing business is how we're focusing on the technology. So I think that's what's going to steer us where we're going to invest our dollars, and then clearly coming up with a fine definition that says, here's how we define digital banking. And I would tell you right now, it's not so much of the online banking with a different name that you can open up accounts out of California and everywhere else. We want to think more locally to our clients and how we can enhance that experience for clients to apply for a loan online, to open up an account online, to be able to have potentially live chat and talk to clients on their time, to employees at the bank on their time, whether it's at 12 o'clock at night or if it's 4 o'clock in the morning. Everybody has different hours of work and different hours of the day that's convenient for them. So how can we accommodate our customers? And we're not there yet. So that's the exciting part now, is how do we get there? And how do we keep it internal? What do we outsource? So when it comes to the technology, it's really going to be the dollars that we have at Provident going to be invested in what's going to better enhance the overall experience for the customers.
No, that's a great overview. Finally, I'd like to ask you, obviously you're a really smart guy. You work with an organization that seems to know exactly where it's going. Why does a bank like Provident Bank, and you in particular, Vito, decide to partner up with a Macchia? What do we bring to the table? Seems like you know most everything.
I wish. Not even close, by the way. So I would say that, I made a comment before, and I really truly meant it, and it almost sounded like a commercial, but I think something we do very well is we know where we want to go to build our business.
Yeah.
Okay. And the expertise that a Macchia Group brings in is saying, okay, you want to go here? We're not going to debate you. Let's go through some of the analytics. So here's the demographics. Here's some of the things we're seeing with recent jobs in the area. Let's talk about who your competition is and how is the market growing or not growing. Maybe we could share something with you that you don't know. So I would say on our part, and I'm just going to be very transparent, the banking industry doesn't really have the expertise or the systems to really be accurate when it comes to these analytics, right? Companies like yourself that focus on it. And just recently we've approached you guys and we're working on a proposal now to say, hey, do me a favor and reevaluate my 100 branch network. We've been around a really long time, right? Over 180 years. We have locations that have been in the same spot for 180 years. Have things shifted? I may be making good money at locations, but through your expertise, what are you seeing shifting in the market? What are you seeing changing in the environment? What can we do in the existing locations that may potentially drive more business? Maybe we have to get more friendly with millennials and more digital type stuff where the branches just really focused on walk-in traffic, transactional with the bulletproof glass still up. So I think a lot of that stuff is really bringing the intel to the table, where from the banking side, we could say this is what we like. From the expertise side and the analytics and the metrics, you could say here's what we're seeing. And then with the collaboration of the two, with Provident and Macchia, we could come up with a good solution and run. I use this comment all the time, Tom, and people say, hey, listen, you're doing a good pitch to go into this new market and work with this new company and work with this new branding in this location. I say, yeah, but don't forget something. Not only am I promoting that with my team and say, here's where I want to be and here's where we need to be as an organization to grow mass and to win business, I'm also the one with my team that's responsible to grow it. Right. And I think that's a big difference that sometimes people miss. It's easy on your part to pull the analytics, the metrics, say, hey, you guys need to be here. But at the end of the day, if we don't believe in it, it's not going to work by just putting a location and hiring some local people and say, okay, let's see what happens. Because Tom said it's a good idea, right? So it's that partnership that solidifies what we're thinking as an organization and the metrics that you bring to the table that's factual and say, hey, we could slice and dice this how you want. But we think it's a nice market that you identified, and here's the reasons why. Or have you considered this alternative? And at the end of the day, like I just said, we're responsible to make sure we get to that growth in a short period of time. So we need to make sure we have the right data and metrics to support that.
Wow. Well, it's been a great working relationship, and we so much enjoy working with you and everybody at Provident, and we're so excited to continue that relationship. So it's been good, and in many ways we learn as much from our customers, of course, as we try to help them with their problems. And you guys are one of those organizations that we are learning a great deal from. So we appreciate that very much.
Well, listen, it's our pleasure, and I'm glad we're able to share ideas and benefit from it for both organizations.
Good. Well, I wanted to leave a few minutes here for questions. I don't think I announced earlier that people could send a chat question if they have it. Otherwise, they can feel free to go off of mute and ask us any questions directly. Otherwise, I think this is part, Vito, where you tell jokes.
Oh no, I think my dog ate that sheep. But yeah, I mean, any kind of questions are welcomed, and we know customer experience is something that is beyond the banking industry. So we're learning a lot, which we didn't talk a lot today, but Tom and I have talked in the past about what others are doing. I mean, in the presentation you showed, Disney World and things like that. Lots of hospitality businesses that just focus on customer experience. And sometimes the brick and mortar is a shell, right? It's what you do inside when you welcome people in that makes that experience different. So
very much.
Any questions anybody has are welcomed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll jump in, Vito and Tom. Thank you guys so much for being able to share this information today. If anyone has any questions, this is Jim with ICBA. Definitely feel free to pop them into chat or come off mute and be able to ask the question there. In the meantime, just want to let everyone know that we will be doing a drawing for for $20 Visa gift cards for being able to be a part of today's session. So we will, for anybody who wins that, we will be being able to share that through email later today as well. But in the meantime, please let us know if any questions for Tom or Vito with their great content.
Looks like we did such a great job, Tom. No questions.
Tough when you answer everything, you know.
Yes, it was crystal clear. Yes. Well, and the great thing is today's session is recorded. So for any who want to go back and visit it, or for those who weren't able to join us live today, we'll definitely be able to view, watch it, and be able to send any questions on as well afterward.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Well, thank you both again so very much for all your time today, for your great education on this really important topic, to be able to kind of help understand the customer-centric viewpoint. And yeah, thank you all again, and have a great rest of the day.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Guys. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.